Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about another book for L5R. This time we're going to take a look at Emerald Empire, which was the second source book that they released for L5R with Fantasy Flight. And this, just as a quick, I believe, is almost essential for L5R. I feel that the core book and Emerald Empire really represent the core of the game, because as you've seen from my previous review, which you should check out, I'll leave a link to it down below. The core book, while having a lot of good information on the rules, really lacked a lot of the things that really made L5R good, that really made L5R come to life. And Emerald Empire really did all of that, at least to an introductory level. So, just diving right on into it, the very first chapter for the book opens up giving us a multi-page overview of the entire history of the Empire. And I think this is good because it doesn't spend so much time going to each individual detail, because as it's relevant now, if you're just a new player, you can just quickly gloss through it and you have an idea. And then for each individual piece, you can either dig deeper into it, or you'll at least have enough information to extrapolate and expand upon in your own way. So I feel that timeline is helpful. It also tells us what they expect the current year to be, which I believe is right after the 1,000 years of peace, leaving us in roughly the year... somewhere around the year 1124 IC. Sorry, I had to look that up. And so this gives us an idea of both where the timeline is officially, which seems to date around the Clan War period, pretty much all the way back to where First Edition had it originally. So we've kind of scrapped everything that they've done so far, and we're now just working with whatever Fantasy Flight tells us is the meta, or the overarching story, and we can just go and pull whatever else we want that's undefined, or change it based on how we need to. It then rolls into the next chapter, really detailing various castles and strongholds, and pretty much telling us the difference between Kyoden and Shiro, and how they qualified structurally. There's example maps. I mean, throughout this whole book, it goes into exceedingly high levels of detail for every little thing, explaining what happens if someone pulls out a fan and has a conversation behind it, what that means, how it's supposed to be culturally dealt with. And these are all really little details that I personally get a lot of joy out of, because I feel they add to the entirety of the game and the subtlety that really makes L5R work. At one point, they even talk about how you might set up another visiting clan's banner just a little bit lower than your own. And this is a sign of great disrespect, but it is not so much so and so outright that someone could really bring it to you as an issue. It's not like you're insulting them in court in front of everyone. It's just slightly lower. It's that slight subtle insult constantly. And I really enjoy that. And I enjoy that the book highlights these things, because it does also show to new players that the world of L5R is this one where veiled, slight, shadowed insults are the currency. It's those slight things that will make or break. Those are what make peace. Those are what make war. And it goes throughout this whole thing, explaining the daily life of people in these castles. If they're courtiers, or bushi, or shugenja, or pretty much everyone who would be in there, as well as the different roles that might be filled in the castle, what the matchmaker does, what these people do. And it really goes into an immense amount of detail, so that you could both make your own from having read that section and have a very good idea of what to do, but you could also just really flesh out the examples in the book, because it does give you a handful of examples of castles. It gives you a brief overview of their history, and adventure seeds as well, and kind of goes into little bits of detail here and there. And they give you really the whole outline for an adventure in 4 sentences. For usually about 3 to 4 places per. And this is really good because it also follows that old style from the first edition where it was like sizing up, drawing, striking, using the dueling terms. And it mirrors that. It doesn't use the exact same terms, but it has the same style. And I like that. It was a nice touchback to the first edition. Again, that subtlety. I actually enjoyed that. And so it goes on to detail a handful of castles, Shiro and Kyuden. And then the next chapter, and it goes into decent detail for it. In the next chapter, it goes into cities and economic centers, and then once again goes right back into the detail, like how this is going to work, what city life is like, how does it operate, what are the protocols for visiting one, how are they governed and managed, and what are the roles that people can play within those places, and then folding right on into another set of examples with adventures. And I thought this one was also extremely useful because it hammers home more and more about what you need to do in L5R. And you don't have to read every page of this book. It's quite a long book, and it is a very detail-heavy, dense book. But I feel that if you read the whole thing, you get a very good overview, and then if you really wanted to dive deep on something, it gives out a very good outline for how you need to do something and how you need to structure something. Throughout the whole way, it doesn't just tell you this is how it gets done. It might explain, okay, well, this is now also how samurai would purchase things, how they would go about doing this, because they don't touch money, really. And it has lots of sidebars that explain this little thing or that little thing. For example, going back to the castle one, it talked about how the role that servants play and how they play a very big role in the intrigue and espionage because people ignore that they even exist. And these sidebars persist throughout. How does crime work? How does crime get dealt with? How does it get punished? It then goes into, again, a few example cities and economic trade centers. And then with adventures, some of them are very cool. One of them I plan on using. And then it flashes down into villages and rural areas. And this was, I found, very interesting because it details the villages, but it also details how there's actually a special term for the samurai who live in the villages, because it's very, very rare that they do so, and they're actually usually closer to their peasant underlings, for lack of a better term, than their city counterparts. And they might actually help them do work. And so there's a term for it, and this is actually very relevant because I was playing in a game where one guy was playing a character that was like that, and so when I told him about that was actually even reflected in the book, he got very excited. So this offering of different ways to play is persistent through this whole book, and it really does expand what the core book kind of left as this is the way that you play. Emerald Empire then goes, okay, those are the rules, and that's the general, very, very general idea, but here's how you expand upon it and make everyone feel different, really tell a story, really dig deep into a narrative. After that, there's a chapter on shrines and sacred places, and it details how those are maintained, who goes there, the rituals that go around them, a little bit on Shugenja, and then it moves into examples of shrines and adventures surrounding those shrines. The next 2 chapters I'm just going to quickly flash through because they follow consistently the same pattern. It's lots of detail, and then samples with adventures that are tied around it, and then it goes to the next chapter. So the next one actually details monasteries and the monk orders that go around them, and that is very important because this book also then offers 2 additional monk paths that are not tied towards family, which I'll get to later, as well as just wilderness locales and places that people would travel through, like the Dragon Mountains, and really talks about them and adventures that could happen in there, as well as the hazards and dangers that go into that. And that pretty much concludes the section on the world. Then after that, it actually goes into the crunchy player bit, which is relatively short. It makes up, I think, around 30 pages of the book out of a 260 some odd page book. Only the last 30 are actually crunchy in the sense that they provide player option. It opens up and pretty much provides the Imperial families as playable, being the Mia, the Otomo, and the Sepun, and pretty much gives you how you'd play them. Again, this is the same detail that you get in the core book, just for these groups, so there's not like an expanded page count. I imagine that will probably come in a later book, but I'm not certain. We'll really get an idea of how that's going to be done once we see the Shadowlands book, which has now been released at the time of posting this video, and I'll have it in probably about a month when it finally arrives here in Taiwan. After that, we then get some new schools. There are, I believe, 9 schools. Yes, 9. You get the Mia Cartographer, the Mia Herald, the Otomo Schemer, the Sepun Astrologer, the Sepun Palace Guard, the Fortunist Monk, and the Shinseist Monk. As I said before, this brought in new monks, as well as 2 weird ones. You can play a Kitsune, however you want to pronounce that, I believe it's Kitsune. So you can actually play something non-human, which was interesting, and it goes into a little detail of how that works, which was interesting. I'm not sure if I would play with that in my group, but I think it's a nice addition because someone else might really, really want that in their group, and I think it's very cool to have that support early on for some of those players, so that they can begin to at least get an idea. And a Kolot Plotter, which was another weird choice. But again, I do enjoy that they're trying really hard, it feels, to offer new ways to play for people, so that you're not stuck with, I don't want to say the same, because there's a lot of detail that can go in to just with the great clans and everything. But it really feels like they're trying to expand even further. Both, it helps them create more books by having these things as definitely things that people will talk about. But it also does provide other ways for players to play. So you hit a broader base, and you can draw more people in. After that, they get new advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to really go into them. They're fairly routine. They're good. They're well made. And then something that's very, very cool was there is about, I want to say, around 10 to 12 new titles in the back. With titles that kind of get touched on in, I believe it's at the Court of the Emerald Champion, the free adventure they released that is a companion to the beginner box set. And they released, I think, like I said, I think 10 to 12 more, for Yojimbo, and there's a few others. And I think that's really cool because those titles, they both give something else for the players to reach for and attain, but it also gives that other thing that they can put next to their school to also try and work towards. I think it's a very interesting way to play. I think it adds that extra little bit to it, and it gives a little incentive to play these certain roles. So I really do like that. And I feel it works well with the world because it is all about that this is your lot in society, this is what you do it well. And so this really helps kind of give those guidelines as well as giving a little advantage. And that pretty much sums up the entirety of the book as a whole, content-wise. One of the other things I thought was really good about this book is the art. The art in the book is really good. There's some pretty sizable pieces. Let's see if I can pull up one of my favorite ones really quickly. You get things like this. You get these really large pieces. There are a few full spreads. But like in the core book, how we see a lot of these art pieces that seem like they blend into the words. They're not like in a box like in a lot of books. they blend in and kind of just, they take a corner and kind of flow through it. I like it because I feel it fits with the book. It does lead to smaller pieces of art, but they are all of very, very high quality. And I think that's I would rather have very high quality art that is evocative both in presentation and content than lots of big pieces of art that are both jarring and they seem separated. I like these ones because it'll talk about a nature scene, and then you'll see there'll be a little corner with like deer around a shrine, and it's serene and it's very evocative of what the words themselves are trying to portray. And so I really enjoyed that throughout the entire book. The art was top tier throughout. So overall, I found the book to be exceedingly valuable, and I really do fully believe that it is part 2 of the core. If someone was to say they wanted to play the game, I feel that every group at least needs Emerald Empire. They can have multiple cores, but they only need they need one copy of Emerald Empire to at least give the game master who's going to run an idea of what things are and really help them spark their creativity. Especially if they're new, they can really get a feel for L5R, as well as give the players, they need to pass through it at least a little bit to understand how the world works and functions and what's kind of expected of them. So I was very excited with this book. I'm a little saddened that it took so long for it to come out. I really wish that it had released with the core book, because I do feel that they are required almost together. If you have zero L5R experience, I feel you need both of them. And so my thoughts are, it is very well done, and I would recommend that you pick it up. As for the future, I do have the beginner box set, which I will, once I run it, I will review the whole thing. I did open it up, and I was thinking about doing an unboxing, but there's really not that much in the box that is interesting to look at. It's just 4 character booklets, 3 bigger booklets that have the adventure and the baseline rules in them, as well as 2 pages of tokens, or 1 page of tokens, a poster map, which is really cool, and the dice. So the box itself, I'm glad I didn't do an unboxing. It's very sparse, but I'm excited to see the content because I have read through it and it is very interesting and well done, and answers a lot of questions that I feel the core book should have answered very clearly, are answered very, very clearly in the beginner box set. So, until next time, I hope you have a good time gaming, and I wish you the best of luck.